that faith came forth every sin and injustice and blasphemy, and the chain of forgetfulness and ignorance, and every severe command, and serious sins and great fears, and thus the whole creation was made blind, in order that they may not know God, who is above all of them. And because of the chain of forgetfulness, their sins were hidden, for they are bound with measures and times and moments, since fate, is Lord over everything. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio, and I thank all of you, listeners and readers and viewers from across America and around the world. We thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. Honored to have as guests with me for the next 2 hours, Joe Taylor. Joe, are you there, brother?
I'm here.
Excellent. Hey, man, we again appreciate you taking the time to be with us and to share all the things that you are studying and examining and looking into. And so, can you tell us about what you are currently doing and involved in and your journey north side?
Well, on my way to the True Legends conference this past weekend, I went from there up to Washington, Missouri area, somewhere out in the woods, down roads that I couldn't find again with some really nice people, to mold this slab of rock sticking up out of the ground about 5 feet wide and 3 feet tall with some strange carvings on it that appear to be really quite ancient. Why it's there, why anybody would do it there, we don't know. But it's if you make a mold of these things, it takes a couple of days. Then you can take it back, make a cast of it, and then light it from all different directions, study it upside down and backwards, pour black sand in the grooves and see if they show you something. All sorts of things you cannot do out in the field. In fact, this thing is sitting up at it's tilted about 4 degrees forward, so that's the hardest kind of thing to make a mold of, especially if you make a hard plaster mother mold shell of it, because that wants to fall off, so you got to come up with all kinds of tricks to hold the plaster in place while it sets up. But we got it done and got it back to Texas just this afternoon. I'll be cast. I did a cast for them just after we pull it off. I did a cast, left it with the good folks there so they can start working with it. And I'll make one here, and eventually, once we get it dried out and hardened up, so I can make it available for study, I may invite people in to come take a look at it, see if you see anything, see if there's some strange message there, symbols that would tell us something. It may be, who knows, may not be anything. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. People that don't go out in the field and don't do anything never find anything. So we'll wait and see. It appears to be quite old. It's carved on rocks, on sandstone, hard sandstone. So it's doubtful that the American Indian, as we know them in that area, did that. We don't know of them doing those sort of things. They did other things, but there's a chance it might have been done by some of the giant tribes, some of the European tribes and Middle Eastern tribes that made it over there. Could have been made by Vikings. We don't know. That's why I went to the trouble to mold it. It's a long ways up there, almost to St. Louis, Missouri. It's almost out of the state, but I was able to do it, and we got it done. So that's the current project. Others are in the works, but that's going to be pretty fascinating to see what turns up when we put black sand on it.
Very interesting. Was it in any kind of archaic script that you recognize, or?
No, and like I say, my job was to get the thing molded and get out of there because weather and it's very uncomfortable. Couldn't get in the right position to be comfortable. Just I feel like I've been beat up. It's so difficult to do. So I didn't try to study it. Just get in there and make the mold. They had looked at it quite a bit, and that's why they felt it was important enough to have me come up there. So there are two strange holes in it. One goes all the way through. It's about 2 inches across, goes through this slab of rock, which is probably 8 or 10 inches thick. How in the world anybody would drill a hole in it or why they would? And then there's a smaller hole that's either filled with dirt or something or doesn't go all the way through. So I told him, I said, well, it could just have been sandstone that formed around a root of a tree or a branch of a tree, and then that's decayed away and you've got the hole left. They're thinking, could it be a mooring stone? Because, we've been told by archaeology and paleontologists that the key to the past is the present. So what we see today, you just magnify it times a million and you've got the past. Well, I've just proved that so many ways I can't even begin to tell you. There are a lot of places in the United States that used to be an ocean, and they're not an ocean now, they're mountains and valleys. And after Noah's flood, there were a lot of inland seas, giant lakes, rivers that continued to drain for a long time and so forth. A lot of those have drained or dried up, or earthquakes have split them and they ran out. But in some places, like out at the Lake Lahontan out on the Nevada out there at the Lovelock Cave site, you can tell, and even archaeologists would agree, that there used to be a very high shoreline in there, which would put you, a couple hundred feet from the entrance of Lovelock Cave. Well, it's nothing but a dry desert now. I mean, there's no water there at all because that lake at some point in the past breached. But the evidence of it being full is there. So if you remember that when you're in other places, it's like, well, could this possibly have been a mooring stone? Because where's the water? Well, turns out that some of the old timers remember there used to be a lot of water in there at one time, or during some massive flood, like some spring melt or something, water might get up really high. And you look at the strata of the rock around there and go, yeah, I can see that. So that's not a dumb possibility. So we're looking into that. And nobody's excavated around this thing. It may be too big to be anything like that. But it is in the ground, and it'd take a mighty big boat to pull it away. So that is very possible. And, brings up a lot of questions.
Yeah, when they, discovered what they believed to be Noah's Ark there in Turkey, they found a lot of those stones as well. And this is way high up in the mountain, and people didn't believe that the water levels were ever that high enough. But I do remember reading stories about some of these supernatural myths there in the area, and of Kincaid's discovery long ago in the Grand Canyon of, the Egyptian artifacts that were said to be, or Oriental even, that there were some Buddha-like statues, and they spoke about the giant statues and things of that nature.
Right.
But that there was also that it was a high entrance, and that possibly, according to the mythology, that at that time there existed a lot of water in that area, and that it was an inland lake or sea, and that the way that it was situated, that these artifacts in these particular places, they were built upon areas which might have overlooked that kind of Bay Area. Do you have any ideas on any of that?
Uh, yeah, I think there again, the past, the present is not the key to the past. It doesn't tell you enough. And I think that's highly possible. That's probably, the Grand Canyon's a place of great mystery. Even today, it's a strange place. So if you go back a few thousand years even, was there a dam somewhere down at the bottom of the canyon that kept water rising higher and higher so people could go and come by boats into the higher levels of the cliff walls? I think it's entirely possible. And I read quite a bit about the stuff you're talking about there, and unless someone just flat making stuff up, it sounds like that's what they found, and then that place is apparently dynamited, so they couldn't get back in it. Those Murray stones over there in Israel, seems like it was on the Sea of Galilee or somewhere. They had found some of these stones. That the sea has gone down quite a bit apparently in level. But that's what, they had these big old stones there that would hold a boat even in strong weather. So you find one of those and the average person would think, well, what the heck is this? But if you know about them, the only reason they might have been done was to hold a boat in place. Then you have to reconstruct. Well, okay, that means there had to be a boat in here. Where is the water gone? And I'm one for trying not to make snap judgments. We all want to be experts. We all want to pass judgment on everything so we look like we really know something. And a lot of this stuff we just don't know very much about. And I try to encourage people, keep an open mind. There may be 4 or 5 different possible answers to this problem. So, let's consider them all and see if we can't get close to the truth.
Right. Another thing, and we'll just touch upon this because there are some other things that I want to go into, and you had mentioned that you wanted to speak about pre-existence as well, which is one of my most favorite topics and something that I cover a great deal in my work and not a lot of people really talk about. But wanted to also speak about how the discovery, and there seems to have been in the distant past here in America that there's scattered what is called Ogham writing that is similar to Celtic runic and also this ancient script, and also that Hebrew has been found present here in the Americas, and that we know certainly a giant race predating the native peoples, that even the natives, they speak about these beings haven't existed here and that they ruled over this land sometime in the ancient past. And certainly before these settlers, when they first arrived here and began to clear the land, they discovered a lot of these huge mound structures contained the skeletons and grave sites and remnants of these particular peoples that many, warriors found with their armor and swords and things of that nature. So can you speak about that? Even Abraham Lincoln had made mention of them in a speech that he gave a long time ago, talking about the Niagara Falls. But can you, bring some of that to light, anything that you know about some of that as well? That would be of interest, I'm sure, to the listening audience.
Yeah, that's everything you're saying is that's true. Most people don't know about it. Everybody's still trying to figure out what world does this stuff mean. There's a place in New Mexico where there's a large stone that's fallen down the hill there apparently, and it has what appears to be, as far as I can tell from people I've talked to, the 10 Commandments pretty much in order, written in Paleo Hebrew. So I have a sort of connection to that I don't know if I've mentioned that before, but the man that married my folks was almost full-blood Comanche Indian, a primitive Baptist minister, and he was telling about the Indians, the Comanches, that he became a member of the tribe out there ultimately, and they took him to a place near Albuquerque where he said he stepped off these ruins that he said were he had his King James Bible with him, said it was a 3/4 scale copy of Solomon's Temple. Where the ruins are never finished, he couldn't tell, and so this stone may be a part of that. So, we have been told by the archaeologists that nobody could do anything, and finally they walked across the Bering Strait and got over here and made an arrowhead, and that's it. But right. It's just so wrong and so completely untrue that's the only thing that happened. So there was people, after the flood, you had the most fantastic ship ever made, certainly at that time. In people's knowledge, so for hundreds of years, they knew about getting on the water and going somewhere. And we know of a lot of ancient boats that are made out of reeds and all sorts of other things. So people weren't stupid. They're probably smarter than they are now. Right. And I think they just went all over the world. People are curious. Yeah. And after they, went somewhere and, hey, we like it here, they did well and began to proliferate. They had to bring their women along, and so they could build up a tribe. And then a lot of their ancient memories become forgotten or become clouded in storytelling because there's nothing to relate to it today. Because they're out here in the middle of the Texas plains and they may have gotten here a couple thousand years before by a boat somewhere. They just don't think about that anymore. But those runic stones, there's quite a bit of that up there in, I guess, in Minnesota, Michigan. And, that apparently proves that the Vikings are over here sometime, who knows when, but we don't know why they didn't stay because it's pretty cold up there, but so is where they came from. Maybe everybody got sick. Maybe it was a really bad winter, dry winter, bad summer. They all went back, but they left their marks. They carved those stones. So to say they weren't here is really kind of just denying history. The Celts, so all those guys in the last couple hundred years, at least in Ireland and England, other places, I think even in some of the parts of France, you had some really tall people. They weren't really giants because they're only 7.5, 8 feet tall, maybe some of them taller. But, a man that's 8 feet tall can walk a long way in a year's time. And we forget that people used to walk a lot more than now. And we forget just how far you can go on foot in a year's time and build another boat and go to some other part of the world. So, again, we've just been so dumbed down by archaeologists, making us think that only, we just recently came from apes and became us. They really damaged world history, in my opinion. But all these places you're talking about, the Ogham writings, I don't know that much about, but I know there's a lot of that stuff. And I've seen some of the things out in Arizona, Utah, those places where you see a spiral. It's somehow tipped into the rock with a flint tool, a horn, or maybe they had metal. It's a spiral. There's a bunch of straight marks beside each other. You go, that doesn't mean anything. Yeah, not to you. But if I wrote my name out and gave that to somebody in some other country that doesn't write like that, writes down instead of across, they look at it and go, that doesn't mean anything. It's just somebody scribbled something on here. So we're really at a loss to recreate some of these things, especially a lot of Indian carvings and paintings. They're there. We just don't, unless they recorded what the tribes of that area told them. Some of this stuff it's Greek to us.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely believe that there's a hidden history and like you had mentioned previously, that the ancient peoples were far smarter and understood things that, as far as technology, that they may have been even superior in capacity than what we are now. Certainly that there was an era of history where the megalithic structures and the city and the cyclopean architecture, it shows a capacity that we can't even replicate in this day and age. And so, for the whole scientific narrative to declare people in the ancient past or, the fallen angels, if they were present during that time, as being primitive, and that somehow, these hunter gatherers and cavemen and all of that were able to achieve uh, constructing or putting together things like that. I mean, and then all the anomalous artifacts and things that are found, like in coal, whether it's just strange artifacts or whatever, but those kind of things, those out of date and out of um, place items, uh, show that we have to reconsider a lot of what we accept as being scientific fact.
It's unfortunate that in America, when we begin to form a scientific community and a geological uh, um, knowledge, and then paleontology came along after that, it's unfortunate, but that by the time that stuff began to really be formalized, written about, published, and utilized by, say, the federal government and others, they have been infected by Darwinism and Darwin's ideas that everybody used to be just a bumbling ape. In fact, the way the caveman was presented, he was dumber than the monkeys in the trees.
All right.
Yeah. Well, that's just completely untrue. They look at things from modern. What's that term? They modernize their thinking that, oh, he lives in a cave, he must be primitive. Well, good grief! You ever heard of people living in basements in New York City?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a cave, isn't it?
Right.
Are they primitive? And someone said, well, the Africans over there live in mud huts. Yeah, you probably would too. You make it up, you mix some water, make some bricks, and it's nice and cool, and it doesn't cost a lot. You can rebuild it. So what's so primitive about that? That seems pretty smart to me.
Right, and you can move and be nomadic if you need to, and
Yeah, you can't move a building made out of cut stones or bricks cemented together. No, you ain't going anywhere with that thing. No,
exactly.
it just really irritates me that they have made our ancient ancestors into such dummies when it's just completely untrue. They weren't that way at all.
Right.
I don't really use the word devolution because I don't think we ever evolved. But I think man's going downhill. His health, his mental state, his our intelligence. I don't think we're like we used to. We're not as good as we used to be.
Right.
Our teeth aren't as strong. Our bones aren't as good. And we depend a lot on hydraulic and brute force today. You can build a road with a caterpillar, but the ancients used principles. They used they knew how to work a fulcrum and things like that. So if that's all you had, you'd get really good at it and would explain how they did a lot of the stuff in the past that we just cannot even figure out today.
Right.
Or you have to say there must have been some fallen angels in there. Don't want to do that, of course. But you're left with trying to have primitive man do all this incredible stuff, or maybe he wasn't so primitive, or maybe he had angelic help. But
right.
the archaeologist doesn't want the last two.
Yes, they don't want to even go there. And then the whole other thing that the Bible speaks about in great detail is the presence of the giants after the interdiction of the the fallen watchers with the daughters of man, and that the creation of this hybrid being, of this men of renown that we see in the storyline, of Goliath and Og and others, that even in the land of Canaan, that there was a presence of these beings that made us look like grasshoppers in their sight. And this also, because it's contrary to Darwinism, has been swept under the rug and completely, as far as made mythology and considered to be fairy tale, like Jack and the Giant and the Beanstalk and all of that, the Fee Fi Fo Fum and all that. But again, there's a basis of truth, and certainly the scriptures verify the presence and that these beings were cannibals, that the whole reason for the flood of Noah's day was to bring judgment upon the fallen angels, as cited in the book of Enoch, and to destroy from the world this abomination, this hybrid seed line, which warring against the sons of Adam, that they were going to wipe out humanity, just as Christ said, unless the days be shortened, there should be no flesh left. Speaking about the end of times, and how as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the second coming of the Son of Man, that we see these kind of things, the hybridization, the genetic experimentation, the miscegenation, corruption of the DNA, that those kind of things are occurring even now. And so, can you comment on that aspect of the hidden history as well?
Well, it's interesting to me that something as fascinating as giants and all the stories we know about them, that it's so scary to academics, to Christian ministers. I don't understand that. It's the most fascinating thing in the world. It says over there when they're coming into the land of Canaan, that we were as grasshoppers in their sight, and we were that to them. Well, and they were tall as cedars. Go look at a cedar. They're not 10 feet tall. They're like 40, 50 feet. So how tall were these people? He goes, well, that's just, like you said, it's just a made up story. It's a myth. And actually, the true meaning of myth, I suppose, really is it's a story. It's the account of the past. But we've made it into myth as a falsehood.
Right.
That's one of the great failings of academia in all its studies is they ignore the Bible. The Bible tells you what all this stuff is, and we're fascinated. We're just in love with. I'm talking about everybody in love with the fallen angel scenario. The extra power, the superpower people, and all this stuff and all their exploits. It's all around you all the time. Major movies are made about it.
Yes.
Major toy sales. And it's been going on since at least the 40s, and 50s when they were making comic books. Superman starts right off, and all these others they start off with. It's basically, I don't know if they intended it, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but it's the exploits of the fallen angels and their Nephilim offspring. And people say, oh, you don't want to talk about that stuff. Well, then quit watching it. Quit watching those movies. Quit buying your kids those T-shirts, or admit that, this is what that's talking about. It's not a falsehood. And I was just driving back through Missouri and Arkansas, and I'm telling you, man, you hear about Strata. That place I was with a guy named Rod Butterworth, who's there at a little creation museum in Branson, near Branson. And as he said, and I wholeheartedly agree and have said many times, he said, look at this flat strata. This entire place, all these valleys all over Branson there were completely filled with this limestone mud in all these layers, and the abatement washed it all away and exposed these cliffs. So you don't think there's any evidence of the flood? For crying out loud, go to Branson, Missouri.
Right.
It's nothing but evidence of the flood. And all the way up into northern Missouri and, all over the place, it's these flat layers laid down suddenly, quickly. And he pointed out another thing that was really interesting. There's one line. He said, look at that wall over there. See that little thin layer? I said, yeah, I see that. There was one in Colorado like that. Here's all these limestone layers. They're maybe 3 inches thick, foot thick, and so on. Here's this little thin layer going along, kind of a dark material, about 1.5 inches or 2 inches thick, goes for a long way, maybe miles. And the evolutionists wants us to believe that, well, that was laid down in one day, over a period of thousands of years, and nothing happened to it all that time. It rained like crazy, of course, but it never cut any gullies in it. But come on, you don't even believe that. Why should I believe it? And if you don't have that stuff all laid down at the same time, right on top of each other at the same time, you can't have that forming. There it is right in front of their eyes. You want to act like there's no evidence of the flood.
Right. Yeah.
And it came, as you said, why is it there? It's a judgment. We made God mad, people and the fallen angels, and all the demonism they got into and all this other terrible stuff, witchcraft, drugs, you name it. We're doing it today. That's what made God mad. God's up there. It's like, hey, fellas, remember what I did before? Doing the same thing. Man, we got it coming. We have got it coming. He's been patient and long-suffering with us, but we've got it coming.
Yes, and it seems like now, especially with the Darwinian, that we evolved a monkey and how they have instituted this mindset into the educational system that children are growing up callous and so lost and wayward and distracted that they don't have personal relating with the Godhead and do not understand the creation with any kind of sanctity for life or respect for the sacredness of just existence and our being made in the image of God, and that the earth and all the creatures and everything being specially created, kind after kind. They think, just out of randomness, that chaos just somehow came together and formed DNA and life, and that it could just do all this, again, out of chaos. When, in my opinion, the order, the harmony, and the synchronicity that we see from a macro to microcosmic level, it in every way, in my mind, displays the fingerprints of God all over everything, and that even to the smallest insect and the dynamic manner in which it was manifest and has part to play within the creation, it just shows divine inspiration, and how people don't see that and don't recognize that is so just beyond me, and how they can ignore and buy into the whole thing that we evolved the monkeys, and yet the monkeys are still here, and they're a whole different type of being from us. But that's just crazy. Comment?
I think monkeys must sit in the trees and laugh at humans.
Right.
I mean, really, it's like, you guys are down there, you're doing all this work, you have to make cars, drive and run them into each other, you have to have insurance, you got to wear clothes, all the stuff, divorce and everything else, and drugs. The monkey just sits up there and eats leaves, and he's happy, eats bananas, and he's got it made in the shade. So really, if evolution were true, what happened?
Yeah, right.
Well, the complexity of things, more and more as they get more microscopes, or they find out that there's different aspects to DNA, You know, they used to say the cell was composed of three things. That's what Darwin thought. I believe if he would have known there were actually billions now, they say, parts of a cell, he probably would have dropped his theory and said, yeah, I guess you're right. Too complex to have ever evolved. Yes, it's too complex to have ever evolved. Like you say, this stuff is all synchronized. The plants grow completely independent of us, the dirt and the rocks and water. Dirty water doesn't matter. And then we eat the plants and we turn it into flesh and blood and brain cells. A cow eats grass, turns it into this meat. It's just, and that's just what we can see with our eyes. I think when, the microscopes now, apparently they say the cell's made of billions of parts. Well, that's just what you can see now. What are you going to do? What are you going to see when you get a really good microscope, fellas? And all this stuff, the electrical currents going through things, where are those? How'd those get there? What programs them? Where does that energy come from? It couldn't possibly start once. Cells don't live very long, and they'd have to evolve all this billions of bits of complexity with a working, moving, self-replicating system, all in a few seconds or a few hours. Please, anybody who believes in evolution is just that's just foolish.
Right. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I want to bring up something else as well, because if you really look at the ancient past, there was a time where everything was of very much larger stature. All the plants, all the creatures, and even humans. The Bible describes that the first 10 generations leading up to Noah, that they lived almost 1,000 years.
Right.
And in my opinion, I believe that they were also of larger stature and had to have been of very much more intelligence than, what we are able to, in this day and age, not living even a full 100 years. I mean, to live 10 times that long, how much accumulated knowledge, how many things could you learn and master? Just to imagine and to try to grasp all that is just mind-blowing. But
exactly. The other thing is, after you live a while, you realize there's a lot of things you don't want to do, you don't have to do, you shouldn't do. So if you live longer like they did, after a while, you're not doing as many dumb things as you did before. With us, we learn a little bit. We start making money about 30. By 50, we're tired of it. We want to retire. And by 70, people just want to sit around and watch the sun come up and down. And that's just really proof of evolution right there, boy. We're just getting so much better. You mentioned about little kids nowadays. They, this whole mass shooting by all these stupid white boys is a thing that's a whole other subject. But when kids now, for a couple generations, at least generation and a half, been watching video games that are violent, they're blowing everybody up, shooting everybody, doing all kinds of horrible things. I don't know. We used to play cowboys and Indians, some days you're being Indian and get shot, sometimes you're a cowboy. But there's something about playing that's different than seeing the actual thing happen on a video, blood and guts. But we also grew up with, one of the first songs I ever learned was, there's a Father up above looking down in tender love, so be careful, little feet, where you go, right? Little feet, little eyes, little hands, be careful what you do. Well, we really believed, I honestly believe, and all the kids I knew really believed, there was this white bearded guy with shoulder-length white hair right up there looking down at us, seeing everything we did, right? And we better not do anything we didn't tell Mother. It worked. It's like when your pa tells you don't do that or I'll thrash you, I'll give you a whipping, he doesn't have to give you a whipping because you ain't going to do it because that whipping's going to hurt. So it works. The threat of pain or the threat of judgment by God worked. They don't have that now, bless their hearts.
Yes, and that's unfortunate because, again, the waywardness of this generation and how just devoid of any kind of sanctity for life and any kind of sacredness in their life, and the no accountability. Many of them do not believe in heaven and hell or anything beyond, and no kind of afterlife and no kind of repercussions for your actions. And so, all the gang violence and people killing you to take your shoes,
Yeah.
it's just insane. And now also because of the depression and the American dream just being so wrecked, and the hopelessness of the youth of this day and age, and again the non-relationship with God, it's really causing them to be hopeless and depressed. And then the medication, and I saw just recently how suicide is the leading cause of death among young people, besides accidents, car accidents and things of that nature, but that they are taking their lives because of they're not being given guidance and direction and given answer to help them to understand the esoteric aspects of life and who they are, why they are, and what all this is truly all about.
Well, one of the other things we were taught when I was a kid was we're here on earth. We didn't have any mystery about that. Our job here on earth was to worship God, praise God, and do the right thing, make God happy. When you have a goal in life that's to do something good and positive, that I think helps stand against a stupid kid's thing about suicide. He thinks about it, but if he's got other reasons for living, or if he's has a good relationship with his folks, he's going to tend to not think that. He's not going to carry through with that. A child committing suicide, I can't think of anything worse that can happen to a parent.
Right.
But since 1973 now, all these kids alive today that are 10 years old, whatever, 13, they've heard their mother talk about abortions. Their mother may have gotten an abortion. Their grandmother may have gotten an abortion. Their great-grandmother may have gotten an abortion. And they know all about it. They know the sister, somebody else's sister, somebody else's girlfriend, some girl in their class has had an abortion. What are they supposed to think of life?
Right.
It's really, if I want to get rid of it, hey, I can.
Right.
And that's just a terrible thing. It's God help us if we don't stop this. And I don't know what President Trump is going to do. I hope he can get to the point where he stop abortion, make it illegal, like it used to be, like it's always been. Murder has always been illegal. It's the law of God. You're not supposed to take life, innocent life. You're not supposed to do that. There's nobody as innocent as a baby. That's the one person we should not be putting to death.
Right. Yeah, we see, again, the Old Testament, where the Israelites, following in the abominable ways of the pagans, that sacrificing their children, passing them through the fire, and how that enraged the Most High God, and that brought judgment upon them. And we see in the scriptures how they were chastised for sacrificing their children unto devils. And, I absolutely believe that abortion is a blood sacrifice to Satan, and that it has been institutionalized in such manner that, you see that what had passed in New York, where they are now aborting children up to the very moment of birth. There's no, not that it makes it any better, but certainly to kill a child in the latter stages of development um, that's barbaric and brutal, and in the manner that they do it by crushing the baby's head and ripping them apart in the womb. I mean, it's without a doubt unconscionable. And for the New York to celebrate that as a victory, and to, the legislators, the Democrats and Republicans and the people that came together to pass that law, to celebrate it as an achievement, just shows how, again, as you were talking about, how close to judgment, and how long-suffering God has been to us as a people and as a nation. But certainly something's got to give.
Well, the one thing they can't claim anymore, it's just a non-viable tissue mass. No, it's a baby. You're holding it in your arms. You're going to murder it now. There's no question. I think they always knew it was not a non-viable tissue mass. It was always a baby.
Right.
Women don't get pregnant by anything but a baby.
Right.
Say otherwise is it's satanic stupidity. And for those devils up there calling themselves politicians to celebrate with pink lights and toast each other and smile and go on like now they can murder a baby who's just been born, that's good. Those are absolute devils up there.
Yes.
And God will judge them, and He's going to judge New York for that. Yes. If the New Yorkers don't rise up against that stuff, maybe New York needs to fall into the ocean.
Well, I absolutely believe that, the mystery Babylon, where it speaks about in Revelation 17 and 18, where the kings of the world have established their seat, that represents the United Nations, and that, there where that is, again, in New York, that the judgment, and a lot of people don't believe that America is found written into prophecy, but I do believe that mystery Babylon, the harlot that rides the scarlet-colored beast, even though that represents the Roman Catholic Church as well, but that the mystery Babylon as a system represents, as far as Rome being the spiritual authority, but London being the banking side of that mystery Babylon, and then America being the military aspect of mystery Babylon, and that, this is a world system, what they call the beast system at the end of days, that the Antichrist will come forth to wield and hold power. And so, I believe New York will be judged at some point, in my opinion.
Well, I've heard a lot of people say America doesn't even figure into prophecy. God doesn't care. That's always really bothered me, because I think, yes, it certainly does figure in. And, it's going to become clearer as days go by where it does fit in. We are a world power. We do, you say we are the military arm in a lot of respects of the whole world.
And the hammer of the nations.
Yeah.
As this is in Jeremiah.
And those guys that get together every day and set the price of gold in England, and all that other stuff, that's all happening. All we can do is just sort of go along with it sometimes, speak against it, and hope that God turns some of the ones in power away from it. But man, it's a train rolling downhill as far as I'm concerned. All you can do is just try to resist it and never accept it, never go along with it. If God comes along and says, okay, get in line, you're fixing to go into slavery, well, you accept that. And, until then, we should resist all this stuff. Mm-hmm. What the UN is doing, boy, I think your daughter may have told you what I said about the UN or what my dad said about it.
We'll say for the listening audience.
Yeah, well, my dad ran for Congress back in 1961-62, And on the Republican ticket, which was no man's land here in Crosbyton, Texas at the time, but they said, what do you think we should do with the UN building? Well, my dad was a cowboy and a farmer. He said we ought to shut it down and make a hay barn out of it.
Right on.
Yeah, that makes some use out of the building.
Yeah, most certainly. Well, hey, Joe, we've got just a couple minutes before break. So if you would, can you share your information, whatever, Facebook, your website, and also about your museum, and then we'll pick it up on the other side.
Okay. You can reach me via the museum at www.mountblanco.com, MTBLANCO.com. I'm on Facebook under Joe Taylor. There's a bunch of Joe Taylors on there, so you got to look at the guy sitting in front of a bunch of bones with a white beard, a yellow shirt, and a white hat on. That's the right Joe Taylor. The rest of them are musicians and I don't know what too, but you can get me there. And I also have an art site that I'm just starting to develop called JoeTaylorArtAndMusic.com. A lot of people think of me just a bone digger and a Giants guy and all that, but my first love was art and music, and all this other stuff just sort of comes with it. But art has opened the doors to all these things for me, into paleontology. But I just decided to start taking some of my artwork, varied artwork, and selling them as prints. But that's on JoeTaylorArtAndMusic.com. So that's how you get a hold of me.
Very cool. Are you pencil or drawings or paintings?
Everything.
Sweet.
Sculpture,
right, yeah.
Pencil, yeah. Stuff in there that goes back to New York City when I was there. Sort of subconscious doodles on the wrong side of masonite painted white with an Othello pencil. I just started drawing whatever came out. That's what's there. And one of them's called birds watching. Another one's called high rise sun. I'm not sure they mean anything, but they were fun to do. And I look at art as you can get into art. You can appreciate art for some message it's got in it, or whatever. But it's also stuff that you can hang a print up because it looks good next to the couch.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
And so it wouldn't insult me a bit if people said, "I'm just going, that'd go good next to my new lamp." Well, I go, great. Buy two of them.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, hold on, brother. We'll be right back for a second hour here. All right, welcome back, everybody, for a second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio, and I'm honored to have as guest with me this evening, Joe Taylor. Joe, are you there again, brother?
I'm here.
All right, most excellent. The last time we spoke, you had made mention to me of wanting to bring up and talk about pre-existence. And so I'm interested to hear what you have to say. And this is something that I full-heartedly believe in, and that it's something that not a lot of people really consider. And so if you would, can you share your thoughts on it and anything that you've learned about the issue, about the topic?
Well, I may have miscommunicated the word. What I was saying about was predestination.
Oh, yes. Yeah, okay.
Probably not the same thing, but
yeah.
A lot of people are really afraid of the word predestination because at least in the Christian circles, they feel like somebody wants to go to heaven and they can't because they weren't predestined. Well, that's not the doctrine as I understand it.
Right.
But to me, it's a really comforting doctrine because Christ said, "All that the Father giveth me, I shall lose nothing."
Yes.
So, okay, all that God gave him was everyone, and he stood as a lamb slain before the foundation of the world.
Right.
In love for us. He knew every one of his people before they were ever conceived. And, the Bible, the Old Testament, talks about being known in your grandfather's loins.
Right. Yeah.
So we're no mystery to God. And whatever that number is, we don't know, but it's a number that can't be numbered. Okay, that's a pretty big number. I think if you look at the Catholics books, you can pretty well get a number of people who they think will go to heaven, who, are qualified. Same way maybe Church of Christ, maybe Southern Baptists and other people. But that's a number. He says that his people are as the sand of the sea. They can't be numbered. Well, then that's a big number. That's not everybody, of course. Everybody's not going to go to heaven. And there are going to be a lot of people in hell. But I don't believe there's going to be one of God's children that Christ died for, shed his precious blood for. There's not going to be one of those languishing in hell, wishing he could have gone to heaven. That's my belief. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's a great comfort. Paul says, I preach to all men that mayhaps God gives some repentance. Well, did Paul know who they were? No. He just preached to all men. Right. Let God sort them out. God knows
exactly,
who.
Yes.
So, to me, I grew up in the Primitive Baptist Church and some of the Southern Baptist Church where my mother went when I was a little kid. And, we Primitive Baptists very strong on predestination, sovereign grace, salvation by grace, foreordination, you name it. And it looks to, a lot of people think, well, if I believed I was predestined to go to heaven, I'd just go out and live like hell. I wouldn't care how I live. And, growing up with people that really, truly believe that, I never saw any of them do that. That does not create that sort of mindset that, well, I just live like I want to now that I know I'm going to heaven. If you're really born again and you believe that doctrine, you're not going to do that stuff. Nobody wants to.
Right.
And if you do, you're mortified that you did it. You're ashamed and you repent. But to me, it's a wonderful doctrine. And little kids, for instance, we're related to little kids. Being born again is like being born the first time. Well, the first time you get born, the father chooses to come into the mother, and they have a child. The child doesn't get to pick who his parents are, what color he was, or where he was born. That's left up to the Father. And that's the way it is to me in the kingdom of God. It's up to God to bring us into the world spiritually. And he's going to do that. But like a little kid, when someone's born again, when a little baby's born, he doesn't know if he's a boy or a girl. He doesn't know if he's up or down. He doesn't know who his mommy or daddy is. He has to learn that. But he is, he's that person's child. It cannot be reversed. Cannot be erased, cannot be undone. Even if he's adopted out the moment he's born, he still has the imprint. He's still the child of that father, and it cannot be changed. I think that's the way it is in the spiritual world. When you're born again, you may be born into a world of ignorance and paganism, but if you're a child of God, that stuff becomes distasteful. You don't want to be a part of that.
Right.
You reject it. You try to see something better. But, maybe you don't get much light in your lifetime. Maybe you never see a Bible. You never hear a minister come in and tell you about Jesus Christ. But that doesn't keep you from knowing him. And in a little child, when I was a kid, they used to tell us, well, you ask your mother, how'd you get here? Well, the stork brought you. Well, we believed it, till about age 5.
Right.
Well, did that mean we weren't that person's child? No, it just means we didn't understand how we got here. So a child of God may think he did any number of things. Well, I prayed a prayer. I was good. I did this or that, and that's how I got to be a child of God. Well, in his youth, he's ignorant of how he got here. Doesn't mean he's not a child of God. And I think I'm a Primitive Baptist, and I wouldn't want to be anything else. But I'm not intolerant of other people's religious or Christian experience. Maybe I don't know everything. I know I don't know everything. So why should I assume that everybody else doesn't know everything? I'm not going to. I might argue with their take on Scripture, but if I see the love of God in them, if I see that they're trying to live a Christian life, I'm going to go with that. And in as much as I could maybe shed a little light into their life, I would do that because it's been done in mine. But predestination, it's really people just shy away from it. I had a roommate one time, he became a famous film producer later on. He said, I hate that word. I wish it wasn't in the Bible. And later on, he came to see it. Yeah, I see. That's really good. That's great. You know, we're guaranteed to get there. Christ bought us a ticket. He gets us to the bus. He puts us on the bus and makes sure it's got enough gas to get there. We're not going to be lost. And to me, that being a Primitive Baptist, we kind of got away from evangelizing back years ago. And I don't think that's right. I think we need to preach to all men. And God will bring the light to some. We're just light bearers. You know, we light of the gospel. The gospel doesn't bring you to life. It brings immortality to light. Mm-hmm. You know, the immortality has to be there. That life of God has to be in you. Then when you bring some gospel to them, they receive it. It's like, oh, great. You know, it's like mother's milk for a baby. Yeah. You know, he knows exactly what to do. He wants that. That's exactly what he wants. And that's the way we are with the Word of God. When a person's born again, they will seek the light. And when they see it, they'll respond to it. I just think it's a merciful doctrine. And then people say, well, so everything's predestined. You know, that shooting, your child got shot, was that predestined? I'm not, you know, some people do believe in total predestination, but you can go, you can drive yourself crazy if you think about that very much. But as far as our eternal state in the afterlife and in eternity with God, that is set, and we're going to make it. And nothing can take us from it. Nothing can keep us from the love of Christ, neither height nor depth or anything, any other creature. As Paul is saying, look, there's nothing. I mean nothing. It's like a done deal. It's like there's no such thing as evolution. I mean none. You know, you're not going to miss the boat if you're born again. That's my take on predestination, and you know, I may be stand corrected, but that's my take.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that as far as you had made mention that God knew us even before the foundations of the world.
Right.
And as he said to Jeremiah, you know, I knew you before you entered the womb of your mother. I had foreordained you to be a prophet unto the nations. Absolutely. I think that, you know, those that are predestinated, that the Father, of course, is long-suffering to all of us and wants all of us to have part in the grace that Christ delivered to us in redeeming humanity and rectifying the fall. And I also think that, you know, as you said about those that if they were to believe that, you know, they are secure eternally in Christ and yet do not live the life and are rapists and murderers and whoremongers and involved in black magic. And, you know, those are the kind of people that are only fooling themselves, and that what it says in Matthew chapter 7, where he says, away from me, you workers of iniquity, I knew you not. That, again, it shows the same kind of thing, that there are both the children of promise and the children of perdition, and that there's this ongoing war between light and darkness in this world. And I do see that, you know, there's a free will component as well, but certainly, again, those that have been predestinated, they know and hear inherently the voice of God and follow a calling that is, as far as the focus on eternity and not getting caught up fully in the carnal aspects of this world, but seeing something greater and perceiving a grander scheme to creation and to life and to, you know, what all this is about. And I think that just as the apostles of old were given a great commission to go forth and share the gospel and to teach all people everywhere about the good news, that we are all as well have been given such role and such mission, and that a lot, even though they may ignore that for a very long time, that really it's been extended to all of us, and that we all have a larger role to play. And especially in this day and age, because I feel that we are that fig tree generation that Christ spoke about in Matthew 24 and Mark 13 and Luke 21. Know ye the parable of the fig tree, and I believe that to be connected to what we saw in this lifetime as the reestablishment of Israel as nation. That was a sign, an indication, even to the fallen angels, that they had, their time was short and they had to up their game and accelerate the whole agenda of the New World Order to try to lay out and to pull off their plans of this world domination, this one world order, and the premise of setting up what I see as the strong delusion, which I believe that is part and tied to the Darwinian evolutionary and the Copernican model of, that the ancient aliens are our creators. And that certainly is being pushed to the forefront by things like the History Channel and, a lot of really what I consider to be really intelligent individuals and great researchers, but yet they are caught up in this mindset that, the Anunnaki or the fallen angels, these fallen beings in the past, the extraterrestrials, that they somehow created humanity and that they're coming to save us again. And the world is getting swept up, and a lot of people are now, I believe, being deceived to buy into this, and that this will be part of what it says in the scriptures, that because they have no love of the truth, that they will be given strong delusion, that even the most elect could be deceived should it be possible. And so wanted to ask you your feelings on that and what you thought about, the whole phenomena right now of the world being led into belief that, the extraterrestrials are our creators.
Well, it's really funny. I've been involved in paleontology now since 1980, and I know a lot of the big paleontologists, real degreed paleontologists that actually do the work. 10 years ago, if when cornered about the fact of creation as opposed to evolutionism, a lot of them would just say, well, we know that there's no such thing as evolution, but what are we left with? Special creation by God, and we're not going to go there. Well, and if you would have said 10 or 12 years ago that, oh, yes, aliens brought us here and seeded the earth, and, they became monkeys and finally got to be black people and brown people and white people. If you said that, you'd be fired at every university. Now,
right.
I began to see about 5 or 6 years ago, I'd hear these paleontologists who realized, these stupid creationists are actually right. There's no such thing as evolutionism, no such thing as evolution. And they would go, well, we believe that aliens came here and planted us here by panspermia.
Right.
Really, that's just, that's like the same people in the end times are going to see what's happening, and they run into the hills and call on the hills, kill us, fall on us, rather than go out and worship God and acknowledge God. That's why these people are going with panspermia. The paleontologists right there with them, the supposed real scientists. That's just they'd rather believe a fairy tale than the truth, and that's what that is.
Right. I agree with you.
I was going to mention a little bit about free will.
Yeah, sure, please.
My view of free will, I think it's like this. When a child is born, depending on your parents, they when you start acting up, you're about maybe 9, 10 months old, you're able to kind of do things. and you just rebel and do something wrong, they slap you on the leg. Well, usually that stops most kids from doing that. As you get older, they train you, do this, don't do that, and you're pretty good. And then some kids just become rebellious. They just do everything wrong they can, but does it mean they're not that person's child? No. No, they're still that person's child. So when a child of God, using his free will, goes against God and goes out and smokes, drinks, and does all that stuff, he's got the free will to do that, but he's also going to get punished because otherwise, like the Bible says, if you're not punished, you're bastards. And someone who just goes on saying they're a Christian, like you're talking about a while ago, and they never seem to suffer for their bad living, probably isn't born again. God's not chastising them.
Yes.
And I don't think a person can live in sin for a very long period of time. A child of God can't.
Right.
Eventually it becomes too much of a burden of guilt. Mm-hmm. But, there again, what's guilt? There's no such thing as sin. There's no such thing as wrong or right, because we just evolved here from monkeys, and we kind of decided during the Pleistocene times we were hunting mammoths. What was moral and what wasn't? Bull corn. That's complete baloney. That's how we got our morals, right? What did they decide? Well, let's don't kill those poor little mammoths anymore. Yeah, but he just killed Og and Mukluk over there. Well, we're going to be nice and green. That's just stupid. But the paleontologists have kind of led the way on this whole thing of, well, there is no God. I've heard them say it. There's no God, so therefore we can do anything we want.
Right.
But never want you to take their wife, their car, their billfold, their PhD degree. No, that would be wrong. Wait a minute. Who says it's wrong? The monkeys don't say anything about that. But you get your wrong and right. I guess you're just reverting back to the Bible, trying to force all that Christian morality on us poor slobs out here. Oh, no, don't call me a Christian. Well, then stop trying to be treated like one. I'm going to take your car and your wife and your money, and it's right. Oh, no, it's wrong. Well, see, they're complete and total hypocrites.
Yes. Yes, and it reminds me of the story, of the Pharisees that were outwardly trying to project their, being upstandard and walking in those kind of righteous ways, but inwardly they are filthy and cesspools, just like a filthy latrine, and so a lot of that going on. And also, I had made mention as far as pre-existence. I tie that also to how, like, Jacob was favored and Esau was hated, because I do believe that, God knew us before the foundations of the world, and that we pre-existed in some manner before incarnating into flesh form, which in my mind is the only way to kind of explain the predestination of how some would be hated and some would be favored when they had not yet done anything in the flesh to deserve such favor or such hatred. I personally believe that, the war in heaven long ago, that that was a key for dividing into both the forces of darkness and the forces of light, and also was a reason for some of us being born into flesh form, that we were given, a chance again to redetermine our allegiance with the Most High God. That's how I see as far as, the preexistence and predestinations and their connections to that whole theme of Jacob and Esau, because otherwise it just wouldn't make sense, because I don't at all believe that God just randomly assigned, well, these people are going to be, my favorite, and they're going to be held to salvation, and these others are going to be excluded, but that there was some kind of personal responsibility which determined those kind of things, just as the fallen angels rebelling against him that they became legion and the forces of light. I mean, the forces of darkness. I also believe that, the Illuminati bloodlines, which take these blood oaths, and that are, have dedicated themselves to serving Lucifer, their father, ye are of your father, the devil, that these are kind of the Esau bloodlines, and that shows kind of the differentiation of what is the two sides of this war as it plays out. And so, those that hear his voice, that follow his commandments, those are the children of God. And so, a lot of deeper aspects that when you really read the Bible, and like Ephesians 1, where it speaks about the predestination, and also, as far as like Jeremiah chapter 1, again, where it says that, God knew Jeremiah before he ever entered into the womb of his mother, that shows something that a lot of people don't really understand, and a deeper aspect to the scriptures, which, again, a lot of people can't make sense of. But, again, the mystery of our coming into this world and serving him, and being given special role, like the apostles that did the work of the Great Commission, that really I think all of us have and can serve God in that capacity if we just really kind of focus our mind and our hearts on what is the kingdom. It says in the scriptures, seek ye first the kingdom, and then really everything else would fall into play. And I try to encourage people to trust that in their lives, and to also realize that, each one of us can, if we choose to stand with God and to stand for his truth, that we can be utilized by him in grand manner, and that we can affect a lot of people's lives and really bring people to remembrance in a way that they might not understand. Because I also believe that with the mainstream churches being so steeped in idolatry, and that many of them being led astray with regard to truth, that God is calling us out of, some of these organized religions, and that he's calling us to gather together as truth seekers, as in the early days of the formation of the early church, where people gathered together and spoke about the witness of Christ and the miracles that they were privileged to see and to experience, and to share that testimony and the good news of how Christ died on the cross for us in order to redeem us and to restore us to our former estate. That, again, especially with this world now being so lost and led astray, and the whole thing of the ancient aliens being now described as our creators, and that so many are setting and, believing that they're coming to save us from ourselves, that there's no greater time than for the truth to be revealed. And I do see that God is working as well to pour out his spirit upon all flesh. And so what do you think, Joe, about the fig tree generation? And do you see that we are in the end times, or how do you feel about that?
Well, it sure seems to me like we are. But, back in the Jesus freak days in the 1969, 76, I was right in the big middle of that. 1973, we all just decided, it can't get any better. I mean, it can't get any worse. The hippie generation is just taking us down to the pits, and all this stuff, drugs, immorality. We just knew the Lord's going to come back in 3 years. It just have to come back. It can't get any worse. Well, he didn't, and it got worse. And we had the punkers, and we had the other people, and now it's down to the Lord knows what, everything goes. So I backed off a little bit on trying to push God to go ahead and come,
Yeah.
Lord Jesus. But so, I was involved with Hal Lindsey. I did his book cover, and one of my friends did his second book cover. We were thoroughly involved with all that prophecy stuff, the olive branch, the olive tree, and all that sort of stuff. The Jews,
right?
And personally, a lot of my friends and some of my brethren don't agree with me, but I do believe that Israel was reestablished a nation in 1947.
Yes.
And I don't think it has to do with God makes promises that are contingent upon us, and sometimes just on Him. Sometimes He promises something has nothing to do with how we perform. He's going to do it anyway.
Right.
Other times it's like, I'll do this if y'all will do that.
Right.
But,
Yes.
it isn't. But it seems to me, I was over in Israel twice. Looks to me like that, that is a Jewish homeland. They're not going to give it up. And, I think that the end is coming pretty soon. I think we're at the end of the week. I believe the earth is 6,000 years old, which is about like 6 days or 1,000 year days. I think we're coming up to it. And, but, I'm going to fight on. I don't believe we lay our armor down this side of Jordan. So whether the Lord comes back tomorrow or He delays till I die, I'm going to continue to fight on. Hopefully, fight for the truth, do what I can to, even straighten my own life out, but help somebody else maybe. And but yeah, I'm in that respect, I am a lover of Israel. I love the Arabs too. I love the Arab people.
Right.
They're great people. There's no denying that. But they don't agree with their half brother, the Jews, and I don't know if I can do much about that. There's an animosity there that's been there from day one, and it's not my fault. If I can do anything about it, I would. But that was done by Father Abraham. You brought up the thing of Jacob and Esau. The way I look at Jacob and Esau is that's covered in God's sovereignty, and a lot of people I struggle with God's sovereignty, but I know that God is sovereign. Like those old sovereign kings, if they want you hung, they just hang you. They have life in their hand. What they say goes. What they say doesn't go. So with God, although He's a merciful and loving God and just and all that, He still does things we don't understand. Why does He let earthquakes? Sometimes sends earthquakes, swallows people up. That's His right. That's His. He can do that if once He's justified. So if He looked at Jacob and Esau and said, Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated, not that either has done any good or bad thing. He wasn't judging them on that. Just I hate Esau. Well, that doesn't seem right to me as a man, as a human being. Seems like God ought to love everybody, and send everybody to heaven.
Right.
But He hated Esau, and everybody said He loved him less. Well, as a whole, He loved him a lot less because He hated him. And you look at Jacob. Jacob wasn't all that good a guy. Esau, wasn't all that bad a guy in many respects. But that's the sovereignty of God, and all I can do is accept it. I can't say I understand it, but I know a lot of some people. I think some Presbyterians, they're more or less Calvinists. They believe in predestination, most of them, and they like to say, well, God looked down through time and He saw that Esau was going to do bad things and Jacob was going to do good things, so He made that judgment accordingly. But I don't see that there. If that's there, I don't see it. And it's just God's sovereignty. And man, I'm telling you, it's like a football coach. He's basically sovereign.
Right.
And I really likes it. So that's kind of my take on it. But this whole fallen angel business, man, that's eating us up.
Yeah, I agree. And again, the aspect of the are having pre-existed, because I do believe, and I can share with you at some point a lot of information on that. It speaks about there's these stories in some of the old commentaries that talk about how even the souls of humanity were created on the first day, and we were part and with the sons of God as far as in the pre-existence. And then the war in heaven occurred, and then there were some that sided with the fallen angels and the rebellion, and that would become the sons of Belial when they are born into the flesh. And so the whole thing again with Jacob and Esau, Jacob being favored and Esau hated, according to the pre-existence, it ties to that particular occurrence in our previous, as far as our pre-existence as, former bright nature, what it says is bright natured beings, that even Adam and Eve, before they fell, they were clothed in what was said to be light vestures, and that when we are restored to our glorified being at the end of days, that we are being restored to our former estate. And so this is a heavy topic to go into, even in just the last 20 minutes or so. And so that's my explanation on how to understand, because again, I do believe that we have personal responsibility for God either favoring or hating us, and that Esau, in my opinion, was part of, like the Illuminati families that rebelled against him during what was the war in heaven previously, and that we had existence and incarnation during that time as angelic beings. Not that we are not that we reincarnate, because I don't believe that at all. We come into flesh form one time, and then judgment, as it says in Hebrews chapter 9:27. But certainly, as the Bible says, he knew us before we entered into the womb of our mother. And in my opinion, we weren't just a thought, but that we previously existed, and that he knew us in a former embodiment, which we can't remember now and we don't have understanding upon, but that, there was reason for our coming into flesh, and why some would be favored and some would be hated. But that's a whole nother thing that we can go into. I'll actually send you, Joe, some of the books that I've written on this, so that if you do delve into it, I think it would bring great clarity to that, because again, it's not just random. God didn't, as a callous, because I do absolutely believe him to be loving and righteous and just, and that everything is done for reason, and that he is justified in his favoritism and also hatred of some, that there's reason and that there's explanation which we can understand if we really delve into and examine the scriptures in a deeper manner than what is taught, because certainly these are teachings that are not brought up in the mainstream churches, and they never will ever touch, why Jacob was favored and Esau hated, because they don't, again, in my opinion, understand the pre-existence. But I'll actually, before the end of the show, I'll share with you one little thing from a book called The Chronicles of Jeremiah that kind of gives a little bit of insight, because I think in me speaking about it here on this show that I should at least give a little context to what I'm talking about, so that people can better make sense of it. But let me get you to comment, and then I'll share with you what I was talking about.
Well, it is a subject that a lot of people don't want to discuss. They can't discuss it without getting mad, and it's and you really can't do it in 30 minutes over a phone.
Right.
But I've had a lot of lengthy conversations. My dad was a great man and a great thinker, read a lot, and every time I came home from Hollywood, we get into something. It was never anything light. It was always something heavy. And our conversations might last 12 hours, and we weren't trying to win over the other one. we're trying to get to a resolution of agreement. But you don't just say, well, okay, let's just don't talk about it. You know, my dad wasn't that way and I'm not that way. It's like, well, let's talk about it till we can't think of nothing else to say. Put it aside. We'll come back to it. But, the more you know, the better you know. So I'd be glad to read whatever you've got. If you'd send that to me or whatever, I'd be glad to look at it and make comments.
Yeah, I will, because I've written 3 actual books about it, one specifically covering this topic in great detail. It's called Skyfall, The Angels of Destiny, and it's on election, predestination, and also, pre-existence. And, it's a topic that not a lot of people understand, but I'll share this from the Chronicles of Jeremiah on the formation of a child. It'll give you a little bit of insight of what I'm talking about. It says this: I will now proceed to explain the formation of the fetus which God created when man approaches his wife. God indicates it to the angel appointed over conception, whose name is Layla. God says, know that this night a woman will conceive. Take this sperm, place it in thy hand, and break it on the threshing floor into 365 particles. He does so. He then takes the sperm in his hand, brings it to God, and says, O Lord of the world, I have done as thou hast commanded me, and now decree what is to become of it. God then decrees that it will be either strong or weak, male or female, rich or poor, beautiful or ugly, long or short, wicked or righteous. God then makes a sign to the angel appointed over spirits and says, bring me a certain spirit which is hidden in the Garden of Eden, whose name is so-and-so and whose form is so-and-so. This applies to all the spirits which are destined to be created. For from the very moment when the world was created, all these spirits were prepared for men. As it is said, what has already been has been called by my name. The angel brings the said spirit, which, when it comes before God, bows down. Hold on. It got blurry, so I have to open up a different one here to get the rest of the story. Okay. Okay. It prostrates itself before him. At that moment, God says to the spirit, enter thou this sperm. The spirit then opens its mouth and says, O Lord of the universe, I am satisfied with the world in which I have lived from the day on which thou didst create me. If it pleases thee, do not suffer me to enter this impure being, for I am holy and pure. God replies, the world which I will cause thee to enter is better than the world in which thou hast lived. And when I created thee only for this purpose. God then causes it to enter this new being against its will. The angel then returns and causes it to enter the womb of its mother. 2 angels are prepared to watch the embryo during its pregnancy. A light shines upon the head of the child, by which it sees from one end of the world to the other. In the morning, the angel takes it, carries it into the Garden of Eden, and shows it the righteous men who sit there in glory with crowns on their heads. The angel then says to the soul, my child, dost thou know who these are? No, it replies. The angel then says, these people whom thou seest here were formed like thee in the womb of their mother. They went forth into the world and observed God's statutes. Therefore they became worthy of this bliss. Know also that thou wilt at the end of thy days depart from the world, and if thou wilt be thought worthy to hearken unto the law and the commandments, then thou wilt be likewise worthy of sitting with these in the places which I showed thee. In the evening he carries it into Gehenna and shows it the sinners whom the wicked angels beat with fiery staves. They cry, woe, woe, but no mercy is shown to them. The angel then says to the soul, Dost thou know, my child, who these are that burn? No, it replies. The angel answers, these were of the same mean origin as thou art. They went forth to the world and did not observe the commandments and judgments of God. Therefore they have come to this place of punishment. Know also, child, that thou must ultimately quit this world. The angel walks about with it from morning until evening and shows it every place which it is destined to tread, and the place where it will be buried. After this he shows it the world of the good and the world of the wicked, and in the evening he places it back again in the womb of its mother. God then encloses it within folded doors. As it is said, he shut it in the sea with doors until it burst forth from the womb and became free. It is further said, I will lay my words in thy mouth, and I will protect thee in the shadow of my hand. God then said, thus far shalt thou go and no further. At the end of that time, the same angel comes and says to it, come forth, for the time has come for thee to go forth into the world. It replies, have I not already told God that I am satisfied to remain in the place where I was accustomed to dwell? And he replied, the place I will cause thee to enter is better than the world from which thou hast come. Now that it pleases me to remain here, why dost thou wish to remove me hence? The angel replies, thou must know that thou wast formed in the womb of thy mother against thy will, and now know that against thy will thou wilt be born and will come forth into the world. He then immediately strikes it, extinguishes the light, and brings it forth against its will. It then forgets whatever it had seen. As soon as it comes forth unto the world, it cries. And so, this again speaks about how we pre-existed before entering into the womb of our mother, and God knew us as spiritual beings before entering into this world. And that it's, again, that aspect of free will and choice and the actions that God knows we're going to do, and that we had part in, the war in heaven, either serving as light or serving as darkness, that determines election. And, when you read Malachi and Romans where Paul speaks about election, that, again, it's described as not being random and is connected to something that we don't fully understand. And as I explained here just briefly, and as I will share with you in, some of my work, I'll send you some of my books on this topic, that there's reason behind, again, why, Jacob and those like him were favored and Esau and those like him were hated. That, in my opinion, we see the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, what Christ describes as the war between the wheat and the tares, the goat and the sheep, that we have this faction of these children of the serpent and the children of promise at war with one another, that Christ said, allow both to grow together until the time of the end. And at the end, I will send my angels forth as reapers to gather the tares for burning and the wheat for preservation. And so, there is this harvest at the end of the world, but until that time, we have these war between these two bloodlines, and that we do have this progeny of the devil, ye are of your father the devil, and that there's this bloodline that has been the murderers of the prophets from Abel to Zacharias. And I believe they're connected to the New World Order elites that sit on the thrones of the world today and that have, all throughout history utilized the divine right of kings. That even when Christ was in flesh, Satan took him to an exceeding height and it told him that he would give him all the kingdoms of this world should he just bend the knee to him and show him a little worship. And of course, he said that my kingdom is not of this world. And so we see that this, in my opinion, this war will continue between these two bloodlines until the end of days, which, you know, that's another aspect of my work that not a lot of people really understand as well. But Joe, we've got just about 4 minutes remaining, brother, and so I'll get you to comment on what I just said and the story that I just shared. And then if you would share final comment for listening audience. And then, of course, after you check out some of this, we'll do another show to, you know, give you a chance to share what you think about it.
Well, for one, you know, you think you know everything, but I've never heard of the Chronicles of Jeremiah before. So that's pretty interesting stuff. You know, on the face, I wouldn't agree with it, but I would sure look at it and see the context of all that. So I really understood what he's saying. That's some, you know, it sounds like biblical language for sure. But I've never heard any of that before.
Right.
Not detail. To me, God is, he didn't have to save anybody, didn't have to redeem anyone. After Adam sinned and we all die in Adam, as the scripture says, and Adam all died. You know, he didn't have to redeem any of us, but he did, and redeemed, you know, a vast host of us. It sounds to me like, and that's why I need to read what you've got there. It sounds like works. In other words, if you do good works, you get to go to heaven. And we know that's not true because not works or man's will or man's might. So if that's what he's saying, then I couldn't agree with that. But like I say, that's all new to me, man. I don't know where you find this stuff.
Well, I've been reading a lot of ancient manuscripts for a very long time. And in my opinion, it's not that works justifies or that can redeem you, but that being born again, certainly you have to live according to the example of Christ, that you just can't continue doing and sinning. You know, that even the prostitute that was brought before him, that, you know, he said, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Even to her, he said, go forth and sin no more. So in my opinion, being born again in Christ, that we have to do that. And we can't just go out and be and live a sinner's life and expect to be redeemed through him. And so that's kind of the way I see all that. But
I think James answers that. He says, oh, so you've got faith? Well, show me your faith without your works, and I'll show you my faith by my works.
Exactly, yes.
Say they're Christian, do all this stuff and everything else. But if good works don't follow their being born again, their conversion, what evidence is that they've been born again? They're just fooling themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah, the two go hand in hand. We're predestined, we're foreordained unto good works. And unless you're born again, you can't do any good work. But if you're born again, then you must be doing good works. You have to do good works. Otherwise, where's the evidence that you're born again?
Exactly.
So whenever someone thinks of preexistence, you know, what have you done today? What are you going to do tomorrow? What have you done to serve the Lord and to love thy neighbor as thyself?
Amen.
And are you just one of those kind that says, be ye warmed and filled and don't do anything for them? Well, that's no good. That's just talk.
Right.
But have you done anything for your fellow man, especially unto the household of faith? Do good to all men. That's all men. But especially unto the household of faith. If you're not doing that, you know, why would I think you're a Christian?
Absolutely. I fully agree, brother. And thank you, Joe, again for joining us. It's always been, you know, and always is a fantastic discourse. And yeah, I will send you some of this information. Take a look at it, and you know, we can discuss it more, because I know it is a topic which most people have not ever heard about, but I do believe it will give you some food for thought.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, anytime you bring something up new, I want to know about it.
Well, you know, I'm always going to do that, because there's a lot that I teach that is contrary to majority opinion, and it's only because most people don't read and study as much as I do. So there's a lot to be discovered out there.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Yeah. All right, brother. God bless you, and God bless all of you listeners, and thank you for joining us this evening. Be blessed. Shalom.
Okay. God bless you, Zen. Bye-bye.
Good night, brother.
Shalom.
Shalom. God bless you too.